Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Abilene People, the podcast here on BigCountryHomepage.com, where we talk to Abilene's most interesting people. And remember, if you're watching this online, you can also watch this on your big screen TV because it's streaming now on the KTAB Plus app on all your streaming services like Roku and Amazon and Fire Stick, all that stuff, and also I think Apple TV. But nevertheless, we are always here with the most interesting people. So if you want to see today's guest, Al Pickett, on the big high-def screen, be sure you're checking him out on the streaming app, KTAB Plus. How are you, Al?
I'm doing great. It'd be a little scary to see it on the big screen, right?
Yeah, well, that's why whenever I flash by and see myself, I just turn it. I think, what am I doing here? Okay, so Al, you are the genius behind the Big Country Athletic Hall of Fame.
I don't know if genius, but I did start the Hall of Fame in 2002.
And so that's what, 22?
Well, we just had our 25th annual banquet.
I'm terrible with math.
Yeah.
And you just had your induction.
Just had our induction banquet, our 25th annual banquet. We've now put in 260 people into the Big Country Hall of Fame.
260?
Yes.
Wow. Okay. And so of those 260, and you are one, and there's just a handful of media people.
There's seven of us media, yes.
Yeah. And I want to talk about one of those because I remember him, but we'll also talk about you and your time at the Reporter-News. Okay. But originally, you're from Kansas.
The big town of Council Grove, Kansas.
And Council Grove is famous for?
That's where the treaty was signed for the Santa Fe Trail, and Main Street is the Santa Fe Trail. That's where the wagon trains formed to go to Santa Fe. And so it's a real historic town, a lot of tourism. The oldest restaurant in west of the Mississippi still operating in the little town of Council Grove. So that's where I was born and raised.
And I guess that restaurant's not a fast food restaurant.
It is not. It is the Hayes House. I'll give them a little plug, the Hayes House.
It's not a drive-through.
Nope, it is not a drive-through.
And so that happened. That was like the 1800s.
1825.
Yeah. So a lot of history there, and it's really a beautiful part of the country. But Council Groves is off the beaten path. I don't know that I've ever been there, but you were telling me that you finally persuaded your wife, Carol, is that right? Your wife, Carol, that she also has been converted, that she thinks it's a beautiful part of the country.
We met in Arkansas, moved to Texas, but she's from Nebraska. So she's from Nebraska, I'm from Kansas, but we would go back every year where my folks were still living. And we usually go after school was out because the kids were, in summer break, and the hills would be green. The Flint Hills, if you've never seen them, they're beautiful. Not many trees, just rolling hills. And finally, after about 10 years, she goes, it really is pretty nice. So I think I won her over.
Yeah, it is. I've had the pleasure of driving through the general area from Wichita to Emporia a few times, and it's really remarkably beautiful.
And people don't know about it. It really is a beautiful area.
Well, it's kind of weird because there's hills, but I still, my memory says it's flat, but there's still hills.
Well, it's still the Flint Hills, and it's ranch country. It's big, and if you have a wet year, you see thousands of cattle across the hills.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Okay, so let's talk about the Hall of Fame. But on the way to the Hall of Fame, you were the sports editor for the Abilene Reporter-News for a number of years, right. And that's how I remember you. And you covered high school sports like no one else, with all due deference to our television stations at the time. But, the Reporter-News was where people were going for the box scores and everything that now you don't even think about because you get online. Right. But you were there how many years?
I was there 15 years. I was there from 86 to 2001. And yeah, on a Saturday morning, we would have 40 football game stories with full box scores. Every Wednesday and Saturday, we'd have all the basketball box scores from all the big country. So, yeah, I'm very proud. I think we were, at the time, really one of the finest medium market newspapers in the country. We had a great staff and worked hard, put a lot of hours in, but I was really proud of what we did there.
And who did you work with as the paper editor back in those days?
Glenn Dromgoole hired me to come to Abilene. Glenn, who, of course, he and his wife have Texas Star Trading Company, and we were working for a company in Searcy, Arkansas, and he had been watching my work. He was in Abilene, and we'd never met. And he called one day and he said, "Would you be interested in coming to Abilene, Texas?" I said, "Sure, I'd be interested in talking about it. Where is Abilene?" And 40 years later, I'm still here.
Yeah. And Glenn later these things, there's not a straight line between your time together with the Reporter-News and this, but later, isn't it Glenn who said, "You ought to write a book"?
He did. He hired me to write my first book and my second book, and has edited 3 of the 6 books. So yeah, we've had a direct tie. Yeah, he suggested after I left the paper to do a book called Team of the Century about the Abilene High teams of the 1950s, and got done and it did well. And he goes, "What's your next one?" I go, "Man, I never planned to write one." And I wrote The Greatest Texas Sports Stories You've Never Heard, and that followed that, and then I've done 3 more since then.
And now that first book, that's Chuck Mosier and those famous years. Didn't Abilene High have the longest winning streak, like in the history of
At the
high school
time, the
football?
longest winning streak in the nation in high school football. They won 49 in a row and 3 consecutive state championships.
And how did you research that? Were you able to talk to a lot of the
Well, I
folks who were
talked to
still
some of the
alive?
players who were living, and Coach Mosier at that point was no longer living. But I went back and I went to the library, get a plug for libraries, and I went back and I read the microfilm of every game story from 1953 to 59, the whole 7 years that Chuck Mosier was there. He was 78, 7, and 2 in his time at Abilene High. Just an incredible run. But that's how I researched it. Then did some interviewing, but most of it was just going back and a lot of time spent in the library.
Yeah, and people today again don't appreciate that. Of course, I'm certainly old enough to remember microfiche was the way that
Yeah,
we
yeah.
would go back and research old. How was it all accessible? Was it hard to find? How
No,
did you do it?
the library at that time had archived on microfilm all the papers, so you could go all the way back. Reporter-News from, I guess as long as it's been doing it, probably since the early part of the century.
And do you reckon that's all gone now, or do you think somebody still has all the little rolls and you
I
still
think they
could have
still have them. Now,
you could
whether
have
they're still microwaving them, microfilming them, I don't know whether they're still doing it. But yeah, I'm sure they still have it. I think it all the way goes back to the early 1900s, probably. Of course, the paper was the oldest business in Abilene. Started in 1881, the year Abilene started.
Yeah, so many wild changes downtown. It's hard to believe, if somebody could have looked into the future and told you, hey, at some point there's going to be a park they're going to build right here, you couldn't have believed it.
Every time I drive by it, I go, "This doesn't look right." All the 15 years of walking down the alley to go to work there.
Yeah, yeah, kind of crazy. And then at some point, well, I do want to visit before we get to the Hall of Fame about your books. You've written 5 or 6, and you
6.
have a brand new one, or is it out yet?
It is out. It came out this fall. It's called "It Must Be a Big Game," covering 50 years of covering sports. I decided it was my 50th year a year ago of covering sports, and I decided I wanted to do something. Really had threefold purpose. One, just to talk about and write about unusual games, behind the scenes stories, crazy finishes that I've seen. 50 years, you've seen some crazy ball games over time. I also wanted to kind of point out how the newspaper world and even the radio world, because I've worked in radio and newspaper, had changed. And then thirdly, we did a brief bio on all 260 people in the Big Country Hall of Fame. So it kind of serves 3 purposes. But this one is more than any other. This is a personal one. It's all games and things that I've done or columns I've written.
So let me ask you this, and it's probably an unfair question. I didn't warn you about this, but it occurs to me to ask, what's the craziest game or the craziest finish that you recall? And maybe in the book you've included your entire career, but is there one that stands out from Abilene or the Big Country?
Yeah, it does. I think the Hardin-Simmons Mary Hardin-Baylor game in 2019, I was broadcasting. We've all seen a jillion games in which somebody calls timeout, runs a field goal unit out, and kicks a field goal to either tie or win the game in the final seconds. I mean, we see it on the NFL almost every week. Mary Hardin-Baylor was trailing Hardin-Simmons 14-12 and was driving, and they threw a pass on third down at the 25-yard line, and it was tackled 4 yards short of a needed yardage for a first down. So they line up to run another play, and all of a sudden they realize they're out of timeouts. They can't spike the ball. So they run the offense off the field, run the field goal unit off, and I'm broadcasting going 10, 9, 8, 7, and look back. They were going opposite the scoreboard at 2, look back, and they're lining up to kick field goal. They kick a 42-yard field goal as time expires to win it by a score of 15-14, and Hardin-Simmons claiming, and I think rightfully so, they should have been able to substitute to match up sent somebody in to rush the kicker was not allowed, and they lose the game 15-14. That's close to the craziest game I've seen.
How much time you reckon there was left on the clock when his foot hit the ball?
What's between 0 and 1 second? I don't know. I guess he got it off in time. I can't say for sure, but it couldn't have been very much.
Yeah, and I'm sure over the years you've seen people behaving gallantly in sports and people behaving really poorly, particularly in the stands, particularly moms and dads. I'm sure you've seen your share.
I've seen my share of those. I didn't include any of those in the book.
That's your 7th book. Yeah. Okay. So when's the new book going to hit the? Well, it's already out.
It's already out.
I guess we can already get it.
Right. You can get it. It's at the Texas Star Trading Company and at the museum in the Mall of Abilene and online at Amazon and all the normal places you can get the book. Again, it's called It Must Be a Big Game.
So it must be a big game, and it's a 50-year look and a bio of 260 folks in the Hall of Fame. That's really pretty neat. How long? The bios can't possibly be that long. I mean, it's
just a little paragraph. Just a little paragraph on each one. Yes.
All right. So you started the Hall of Fame. What inspired you to start it?
Well, in 1988 and 89, the Abilene Independent School District started a Hall of Fame. Just had it 2 years. New superintendent came in, dropped it, and they didn't have a museum or anything. They just inducted 5 people each year. And I thought, I was on the selection committee as a sports editor of the Reporter-News. Oh, this is really neat. And so when I left the paper, Nancy Popp was working for Texas State Technical College in TSTC, and she called me about some advice for a golf tournament for a fundraiser for their scholarship program. And me and my big mouth said, you know what we really need is a Hall of Fame. And so we tied with TSTC through 2009, started the Hall of Fame, and then they decided that didn't really match what they were doing. So we formed our own 501c3, our own nonprofit, elected board of directors, and started having continued to have a banquet every year. And the AISD gave us a hallway in the AISD administration building to have a little museum. We purchased cabinets. And then COVID hit in 2020, and you couldn't get into the AISD administration building without an appointment, and nobody was seeing the collection we had. So we started looking around, and the mall called us, the Mall of Abilene, and said, we heard you're looking for a place for the museum. And lo and behold, we moved there in 2020, right? Who else moves in the middle of a pandemic? But we did. And so we've been open in the mall ever since then. And now we're averaging 500 to 600 people a month visiting the museum,
and it's free.
It's free, absolutely free.
So how did you build and orchestrate that? Because you've got a lot of cost and overhead, and so there has to be some fundraising involved, and it's free, and you give away scholarships.
We do give away scholarships. Before we had the museum, we had no cost other than the money we raised from the banquet and donations. So we built up through the community foundation and built up our scholarship program. So now it's kind of an endowment, if you will. And so now we fund it through the banquet, which we had about 470 people at the banquet this year. And then we fund it through donations and contributions. And so, and it's how nonprofits go. It's not ever easy, but you continue to raise money. And we've been 25 years now and almost 6 years with the museum.
And so down in the article that will accompany the podcast, we'll put the website so people can check out more information about the museum. Right. And can people navigate and make a donation through the website?
Absolutely. They can make a donation, and they can also go on and see a video of all 260 people, the videos we had for the introduction of them, bigcountryhalloffame.org. And so you've got all the information, how you can contribute, how you can read about all the facts and figures of all the inductees.
All right, so I did not warn you that I was going to put you on the spot, but I'm sure I could ask you almost any most inane detail about one of the inductees, and you would surely get it. So these are going to be easy. Okay, Billy Olson.
Billy Olson, yep.
Did you see Billy Olson pole vault?
I did not.
In person.
I came along later on, but...
So I just want to say...
You're ahead of me.
I just want to say that we got 3 people in the room. Uday, who I doubt Uday saw Billy Olson. Uday hails from India. You did not see Billy Olson. I saw Billy Olson, And I saw Billy Olson the first time he ever cleared 18 feet.
Wow.
It was something else. And so, but tell us about why Billy Olson's in the Hall.
Well, and Billy and I used to play golf together, so I didn't see him pole vault, but I played golf, and he plays golf better than I do. Billy was one of the great pole vaulters. He at one point held the world indoor record in 19.5 and a half. Sadly, by the luck of it all, he never won an Olympic medal.
Yeah.
In 1980, he probably was one of the two best vaulters in the world.
I was going to say, really, I was going to say easily the best, but easily one of the few best.
And
absolutely,
vaulters. And President Carter boycotted the Olympics in Moscow that year. 84, he was injured, didn't get to compete, and in 88, he got to go to Seoul, South Korea, and was past his prime and finished 12th. So he never won a medal, which is in my book. I talk about some of the 6 Olympians I've known, and its timing is everything. Bobby Morrow was in 1 Olympics and won 3 gold medals. Billy should have been in 3, ended up only being in 1, and never won a medal. Timing is everything in the Olympics.
And then later he made a career here locally as a bondsman.
Right.
And I guess his business, Billy Olson Bail Bond, is
still in operation. He's living in Key West, Florida most of the time now, but has had some health issues. But yes, his business is still going.
Well, I'm glad that you played golf with Billy Olson, because that's better than, having been bonded out by Billy Olson. But probably a lot of people have been bonded out by Billy Olson. Okay. One of my favorite Abilenians, just a character, Charles Cootie, from originally, I want to say Stanford. I could be wrong about that.
That's right.
And he won the 1972 Masters. 71 Masters in Augusta. So let's talk about Charles for a second.
You know who he beat, who finished runner-up to him?
No, I'm not sure.
There was 2 guys named Jack Nicklaus and Johnny Miller were the runners-up, 2 strokes
right?
behind him. They just had the Champions Dinner at the Masters. That's the greatest fraternity of all, to have a green jacket. There's 35 living Masters champions, and one of them is from right here, and Charles Cootie.
Does Charles still go to the Champions
every year to
Dinner?
the Champions Dinner? In fact, everybody but Tiger Woods and Phil Mickelson was there, who were living inductees.
So they had 33 of the 35 were
Yes.
there. One time he told me the funniest thing. I don't know, funny. It just surprised me. I was talking about him playing Augusta, and he said, well, Danny, I can't just go up to Augusta and play Augusta whenever I want. And I thought, really? And so it is really truly exclusive, isn't it?
It is the exclusive, and the green jacket, the Champions Dinner, is the most exclusive meal of all time. The wives don't even get to go. It is just the only champions there.
I wonder what Rory McIlroy had, and then what he'll have if he'll repeat. It's the repeat.
I don't know. I read what he had. I know that it was the funny story was he had something, had, I don't know, a whole bunch of stuff. It was an elaborate meal. And they said, no Irish food. He goes, no, I wanted good food.
Okay, great. I love it. That's fantastic. Okay, Sammy Ball. I wish I could say I had met Sammy Ball, and really probably had the opportunity to a couple of different times. I recall him making appearances, but how long has Sammy been gone now? It's obviously now a number of years.
Oh, yeah, it's probably over 10 years
but
now.
He's in the Hall of Fame, and rightfully so. And arguably, I mean, there's a lot of wonderful, great athletes in the Hall of Fame, but I think one can make a case Sammy Ball may be the greatest professional that's in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I think one of the 2 greatest, without a doubt. I'll talk about the other one in a moment, but Sammy and I had a chance to play golf and talk.
Wait a second. How are you playing golf with all these legends?
It was pretty cool. I had a good friend in Snyder that we always played at the Sammy Ball Golf Course at Western Texas College. But Sammy was the inaugural member of the first class of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He was probably the greatest 2-way player. In 1943, he led the NFL in passing, interceptions, and punting. He still holds the season record for a punting average. He was just an incredible athlete.
Nobody else is ever going to do that.
No,
I mean,
no.
You talk about the unbreakable records. Well, I don't know that it begins and stops with Sammy Ball, but it certainly stops with Sammy Ball, because nobody's ever going to lead the NFL in passing, interceptions, and punting.
No, because nobody plays both ways. I mean, it's just remarkable. And to meet Sammy, I loved to talk to him a number of times. Sammy was like the old ranchers my dad used to deliver gas to in Kansas. It's just, there were no errors about him. You wouldn't know that here's going to be the greatest football player, many consider the greatest 2-way player in NFL history. It was just an old rancher who lived on a ranch between Rotan and Aspermont.
Yeah, yeah. We were recently together at an event honoring Sam Nichols when he retired, and that story that Stan Lambert told about Charles Cootie meant a lot to me. Your story there about Sammy reminds me, and I'll just divert for one half a second, that a friend of mine was the parts manager at a Ford dealership in North Fort Worth, and this older gentleman came in overalls. Well, it turned out to be Mr. Nelson and Byron Nelson, and nobody knew who Byron Nelson. Well, everybody knew who Byron Nelson was, but nobody knew that was Byron Nelson. He just looked like some older gentleman, like Sammy Ball would look like, right? Just in overalls. Anyway, long story short, nobody was helping him. Nobody thought he was going to buy a truck. And Don, my friend, he asked, "Hey, I want to talk about this truck." Well, Don was the parts manager. He couldn't sell the truck, but he told him all about it. Long story short, Mr. Nelson bought the truck with cash and made sure that Don got the sale because he was the only one that helped him. There is a generation, it occurs to me, of men that grew up learning that hard work came before fame and celebrity and sports accolades. Sammy Ball he is cut from that cloth.
And not only was he, 17, 16 years as the quarterback of the Washington Redskins, but then he came back to the ranch, coached Hardin-Simmons for 4 years, and left Hardin-Simmons in 59 to become the head coach of the New York Titans that became the New York Jets. So he went from Hardin-Simmons to the AFL and coached there for 2 years. And so one of my stories I have in the book, and, Peyton Manning was a great quarterback, but also a new history of football. And when he was a rookie, I believe, or early in his career, the Sports Illustrated in their football preseason issue decided to match up one of the former greats with one of the up-and-coming stars. And they flew Peyton out here to the ranch to meet Sammy, and they posed together and spent all afternoon together. And Sammy told me later, said, "That's a nice young man," talking about Peyton Manning. But the story that Peyton tells, they flew into Snyder, and there wasn't a van big enough to hold the Sports Illustrated camera equipment. And then so Bob O'Day, who was Sam's golf buddy and former golf coach in Snyder, got one of the funeral homes to loan the hearse, and they took the hearse to the Double Mountain Ranch where Sammy lived. And as Peyton tells the story, said, "We rode in the hearse there to the ranch, but I didn't ride in the back."
That's great. As much as Sammy Ball liked Peyton Manning, don't you know Peyton Manning loved?
He did. In fact,
good Lord.
In fact, one year Archie sent Sammy, when he was in the nursing home after he finally moved off the ranch, sent him, after the Colts won the Super Bowl, sent him a cap. So they had a great relationship.
I wonder how many years were between Sammy Ball and Archie Manning, because Sammy Ball played like in the 40s. And then Archie Manning would have played like in the 70s. So I just wonder if I would imagine at one point they had met. Archie Manning.
Probably they would have met, but I don't think they ever would have, never against, because Sammy played from 37 to 53 with the Redskins.
Wow. Man, you can know the stats. That's amazing. I wonder if I could ever stump it. Okay. Herschel Kimbrell. Maybe the nicest man.
Absolutely.
I never knew Mr. Kimbrell, but I met him at United Grocery one time, and we were just talking. And you may recall, when I was in the humanitarian aid world, we brought in Terry Bradshaw for an event.
I was there that day.
Terry was great, and I was telling Mr. Kimbrell about it, and I gave him a ticket, and it turns out I don't think he was feeling well and he could come, and I always regretted that because I thought Terry Bradshaw and Herschel Kimbrell talking to one another would have been a really neat sight.
I always tell the story. My first day in Abilene, first day on the job, I was trying to meet as many people because I'd never been to Abilene until I came here. And I met Herschel Kimbrell, Hugh Sandifer, and Gordon Wood on my first day in Abilene. So I hit the ground running. But Herschel was, you're right, one of the neatest guys. And we became really good friends. And, of course, Kimbrell Arena at McMurray is named for him. And truly a guy who spent his whole career, played at Abilene High, and then went to the Metroplex briefly and came back to coach and played at McMurray, and then came back to coach at McMurray for a long, long time.
And unfortunately, I think a lot of people just automatically think, if they're not familiar with Abilene and the history of sports in Abilene, they might just think, well, some guy's coaching at McMurray. That's just because he topped. Herschel Kimbrell could have coached anywhere.
Absolutely. The old joke was that, some coaches can take theirs and beat you, or he could take yours and beat you. And I think Herschel's one of those guys. No matter whatever this team was, they get better and better when he was coaching them.
All right, I would assume that the next guy I want to ask you about would be the one that might challenge Sammy Baugh. There may be another on the list, but Grant Taff. And I would assume you knew Grant Taff.
I do. Not only did I know him, I do know him. Grant, of course, was from Snyder, played at McMurray, and then was a very young coach, got back and was hired as a head coach at McMurray, went to Angelo State, and then to Baylor, and of course, then eventually became the executive director of the National Football Coaches Association, which is based in Waco. Just last fall, they renamed the Tiger Stadium at Snyder the Grant Taft Tiger Stadium, and Coach Taft, who's 91 or 92 now, was there. And I had a chance at the luncheon to be one of the speakers for that. So I've known Grant a long time, and just a great guy and such a great spokesman for the sport of football.
Yeah, and there was an awkward way I worded the question because it sounded like he had deceased. He's very much alive, and when I was thinking about you knew him, I was specifically thinking about when he was inducted into the hall. That must have been a fun thing for you to call Grant Taft.
I remember one story that Grant told. He said that was his 7th Hall of Fame that he'd been inducted into, and he said, but this had more meaning than any of them because it was back home, because he was from Snyder growing up.
Yeah, wow, that's something.
Yeah.
That's you might ought to get that framed and hang it in the hall. Okay, and so when the young man for the Buffalo Bills a few years ago had the heart attack, I think it was a heart attack, and they were afraid he could die on the field, they stopped the game, and that they didn't finish the game. The Buffalo Bills were playing. Well, I can't remember now who they were playing.
It was a blow to the chest, Damar Hamlin.
Damar Hamlin. Mm-hmm. And I learned after that, I don't know if it was you or Sam Nichols that I learned it from, that actually there was a player in the NFL who died on the field, and his name was Chuck Hughes. And of all places, he was from Abilene, Texas.
Yeah, Chuck Hughes is an amazing, amazing story, and a sad story, but amazing story. He came from a huge family, 10 or 12 kids, and they had moved a number of times. And when he actually became a senior at Abilene High, he was out of eligibility. He was too old. And so he worked out with the team, couldn't play because at that time he got to be 19, and Chuck Mosier and Wally Bullington, and they helped get him a scholarship to Texas Western. Now we know it as Texas El Paso. He set a record. I think he had 350 some all-purpose yards as a kick returner and receiver. Well, still an NCAA record. Went to the NFL, played for the Philadelphia Eagles and then the Detroit Lions. He was playing for the Lions on a Sunday afternoon game against the Chicago Bears. Went on a deep route on a pass, and they threw it to somebody else. He was jogging back to the huddle and collapsed and died of a heart attack. And there's a famous picture of Dick Butkus standing over him, waving for the trainers to come, knew something was desperately wrong. When we inducted him, let me go back. When he died, he had a 2-year-old son. Well, his wife never remarried. His wife and son was there, and his son is now probably at that point was in his late 40s or something, but he was 2 years old at the time, and so there was a big family, and a number of family members were there. But what a sad story. But Chuck Hughes was an amazing story, and I think it's a story that's kind of forgotten nationally.
It is.
Here's a guy that died in an NFL game, and the only person to die in an NFL game.
It is, and I sent somebody, I can't recall who, but I sent somebody an email in one of our national sports stories. I had seen them reference, that this young man for the Bills just a few years ago would have been the first person to die. Now, well, that's an easy thing to research. Yeah. And not only is he not the first person to die, but the last one to die, and there may have been multiple. I don't know. I've never researched it, but the last one to die was Chuck Hughes.
He's the only one to die.
And what's incredible is, so he's the only one that died. He's the only one,
yes.
And they finished the game.
Yes.
It was the Bears and the Lions, right?
Yes.
And they finished the game.
Yeah.
That's unthinkable.
Yeah, it is unbelievable. And of course, they took him to the hospital, and but they never were able to revive him. But what an incredible story. I remember watching on Howard Cosell on Monday Night Football, doing highlights, and seen this guy laying motionless on the field. I bet I didn't live in Abilene. I had no idea I would have a connection to Chuck Hughes someday.
And much less meet his widow and son
exactly
at the Hall of Fame. Okay, so Colt McCoy. You had mentioned when I said Sammy Ball might be the most accomplished pro athlete that's ever you know, been from the big country and is in the Hall of Fame. And you mentioned there was another one, and it very well may be Grant Taft, it may be Colt McCoy, but a lot of people today would say Colt. But and as great as Colt is, I'm going to just say, and feel free to school me up on this, Colt was a overachiever who really was a fantastic high school quarterback.
Fantastic high school and
then
college
a
quarterback.
really good college quarterback, and then became a very solid pro quarterback.
Yeah, absolutely. Colt, I remember I wrote the story for the Class 2A feature on him for Dave Campbell's Texas Football, and the headline was Colt becomes a Longhorn when he had signed with the University of Texas. And I don't think any of us dreamed that he would kind of have the career. He's the second winningest quarterback and of all time. There's a quarterback from Kellen Moore from Boise State won more games than Colt, but Colt won more than anybody else.
And would have won the national championship the year that they played Alabama,
right.
But he got that stinger,
right?
And he couldn't even hold the football.
Yeah,
and people forget that
exactly.
they would have won that game.
Exactly. So Colt was an amazing story, and we have a big cutout of him in his Longhorn uniform as you come in. And I don't know how many people who come into the museum who are not from around here go, Colt McCoy was from here? I say, he's from Jim Ned. They go, where's Jim Ned? And we have to explain to them, but amazing. You mentioned about Sammy Ball being the most famous. There's one other you probably haven't thought of, Bob Lilly.
Oh, my word, Throckmorton.
From Throckmorton, Mr. Cowboy.
Oh, I can't believe it.
First Cowboy to be drafted, first Cowboy in the Ring of Honor, first Cowboy in the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Okay. I happen to have a great Bob Lilly story.
Okay.
I'm going to see if you've ever heard this one. I was at a golf tournament in Fort Worth at the doesn't matter, one of the country clubs in Fort Worth, and he was the speaker. It was a Fellowship of Christian Athletes golf tournament, and we're standing in line to get food after the tournament before he speaks, and lo and behold, Bob Lilly comes and asks me if he can cut in line right in front of me. Well, of course. Well, yes, I get to chat up Bob Lilly. And I said, hey, Mr. Lilly, can I ask you something? And first off, he said, it's Bob. And I thought that was funny. You big, tall guy, just a legend, a Hall of Famer. And I said, okay, Bob. I said, I've heard that one of the ways you gained an advantage when the ball was snapped and contact was made, you learned not to blink. You learned not to close your eyes even for a nanosecond, and that gave you an advantage because at the point of contact, everybody kind of blinks for a little bit. No matter how many times they've been hit or they hit somebody, they just do. He goes, no, that's true. I said, how did you teach yourself to do that? And I tell you, I kid you, I'm not going to do it. He looked right at me and he says, well, I started poking myself in the eye. And this is exactly what he said. And he starts poking himself in the eye, doesn't flinch at all. And he says, if you can learn to do that, you won't flinch or blink your eye.
I've never heard that story.
When you hit, and that'll give you an advantage over the person on the other side of the line of scrimmage. I said, oh, my God. He's sitting there poking himself in the eye. Is that not great?
When you come to the Hall of Fame, probably our neatest memorabilia item that we have Bob Lilly's gold jacket from the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Oh.
And when I went to his house when he was living in Sun City at Georgetown, and I said, Bob, do you have anything for our Hall of Fame? He said, oh, I've given everything to TCU, which is where he played. And I said, well, anything you have. And he walks out carrying this gold jacket.
Oh, you had to just
my eyes were, way big around. I said, you don't need it. He says, they give us a new one every year or two. We're all getting bigger or smaller. And so that's how we have his gold jacket from the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
That's the stuff of legends right there.
Absolutely.
Okay, so you think it's Bob Lilly, or do you think it's Colt McCoy, or do you think it's Sammy Ball, or do you think these conversations are silly? But the most accomplished professional athlete that you have in the
I would call a draw between Sammy Ball and Bob Lilly.
Yeah. And then recently, Colt may be the most popular of recent time.
Most popular, and certainly of college. His pro career was mostly as a backup. I mean, he had some starting time, but yeah, I mean, certainly a great high school and college career.
And then you got Cootie with the green jacket, and it's pretty nice to have an Augusta National Masters champion in the hall. That's pretty special.
We have John Lackey, who won 3 World Series, including being the second rookie ever to win Game 7 of a World Series back in 2002. Little trivia we always put out. We have 5 members of the Pro Football Hall of Fame in our Hall of Fame. We have 8 members of the College Football Hall of Fame in our Hall of Fame. And we have 6 members of winning Super Bowl teams in our Hall of Fame. Pretty good for a little local Hall of Fame, isn't
It's
it?
pretty good. And, there are some legends that come out of the big country. And we mentioned that you are one of 7 journalists that is in the Hall of Fame. And another that's in the Hall of Fame that I remember is Bill Hart. And Bill Hart was a writer like yourself. And
Bill worked for me. I was his sports editor for about 12 years before he retired. Bill knew more about big country high school sports than anybody. Bill loved track and field, and he loved football. And he was amazing. My favorite Bill story. I mean, this is a big story, but Bill just was so in tune to all the coaches and everything. He'd come into work about 10 o'clock in the morning. One day he comes in and goes, "Yeah, I think Rotan just fired the coach, going to hire a new coach." I said, "Bill, you haven't been to the office yet. How do you know that already?" But he was so in tune with it, and everybody knew Bill Hart. And what a pleasure to get to work with him all those years.
So, what's the plan? Does the Hall of Fame continue on the course it's on? Do you have other plans? How does a Hall of Fame work? Because you rely on, in fact, we should say in your induction class that you just did 2 days ago, you inducted a number of new inductees, one of whom, Jim Reese, I saw when I was a kid play quarterback at Abilene Christian, prolific passer.
Right.
Then there was a young man who's still playing in the NFL.
Right.
How often do you induct somebody who's an active professional
Not very often, because a lot of times we have a trouble getting them on their schedule until after they retire. But L.J. Collier from Monday, who's playing for the Arizona Cardinals, so that was fairly rare. Case Keenum is going to be in the Hall of Fame sometime. We've never been able to work out his schedule to come at that time. But, of course, what a career he's had as well. He and Colt came through at the same time at Wiley and Jim Ned. But our plans for the future, to continue on. I mean, our biggest problem is finding space and for everybody. And so I think there are other things we plan to do to try to enhance the experiences to come to the museum. But the fact that we can continue to honor and share the stories of the people from the big country, those stories need to be preserved, otherwise they're forgotten, and continue with our scholarship program, because we give $1,500 scholarships every year. We've now given $190,000 in scholarships. We're pretty proud of that fact.
Yeah. Well, another year or two, and you'll be $250,000. That's something to brag about. And one more time, your book, your book that's out, it is a collection of stories over the last 50 years and a vignette on each of the inductees.
Right, exactly. And it's my personal stories, but some columns, some unusual games, some behind-the-scenes stories, how I ended up getting that story. Not all of it's Abilene. Some of it is from Arkansas and Kansas, where I worked before. And so and I, in fact, even have a story from when I was coaching a Little League team, and there's some funny stories when you coach T-ball. But so I have a little bit of all those kind of stories in there as well. But it's a fun read, a lot of short stories. And if we have it for sale at Texas Star and at the museum.
So Glenn got you to start writing books because he wanted to sell your books at his store. So there it is.
Well, he was actually, before they had the store, he was the editor at your paper of State House Press, which was affiliated with the McWhinney Foundation, which was at McMurray, now at Schreiner University. And they decided they were trying to do some local history books. And so 1954 was the 50th anniversary of the first of Abilene High's 3 consecutive state championships. They wanted a book to come out in commemoration of the 50th anniversary. So he said, "Would you be willing to write that?" I had just left the paper, a little more than a year earlier. And I said, "Yeah, I'd love to. How do you write a book?" And so I learned on the fly. I never ever planned to write a book. In fact, Danny, I tell the story. I graduated from Kansas State, and in journalism and mass communication was my major. And your freshman year, you had to take reporting 1, and then after that, everybody had to take that, and you either go into newspaper, magazine writing, radio, TV, public relations, advertising, whatever you branched off. And I decided I wanted to go into radio, TV because I didn't want to write. Well, 19 years as a sports editor and 6 books later, I guess God had a different plan than what I had.
Yeah. What does it say? We make our plans and God laughs. Hey, Al, I got to ask you a question that I ask a lot of guests as we end, and it can be about sports, it can be about anything, but as you think over the next 10 years or something, what would you like to see going on in Abilene? Now, if you want to say a big new Hall of Fame building out, that's fine. That's fine. But what would you like to see in Abilene?
Well, that's a great question. I wish we had a newspaper covering like we used to have a newspaper. I really miss that. I'm a one who grew up with a newspaper in my breakfast cereal in the morning, so I wish we had that. I think just continued success. I think one of the things I've loved to do, I still do the Hardin-Simmons football and basketball play-by-play, just to see the local teams have great success. I was a part of the broadcast team when Abilene High won their 2009 state championship. That's still one of the great thrills to be able to.
Had to be a lot of fun.
To 30,000 people at the Alamo Dome and broadcast the state championship. And so I think one of the fun things for me is, you don't get to know a lot of these kids. A lot of the football players I've covered, they're just a number and a helmet. You don't know them, but the ones you get to know, but to see them have success, that's really fun.
Yeah. Al Pickett, what a joy to have you on the
podcast.
podcast.
It's great to be here. I appreciate it so much.
Really appreciate you and all that you've done and are doing. And I need to take a much longer tour through the hall. I've been in 2 times, and each time I'm always pressed for time. I just need to make a date of that and just spend some time there.
You need to call me, and I'll give you the guided tour. I give you the nickel tour. It's probably worth a nickel for you, but come and do it. I'd love that.
I'd love that. Well, so great to have you. And we really appreciate your time today. And I appreciate you being with us on Abilene People. A big shout out to Uday Singh, our producer. And we will see you next time here on BigCountryHomepage.com or the KTEP Plus app, where you've seen Al on the big screen in high def. But you can see all of our guests as we are on the streaming app, as well as BigCountryHomepage.com. I know that you know where it is or you wouldn't be watching, but just navigate the podcast and you can see all of our podcasts there. This is our, we haven't released our 100th episode yet. We're holding on to that one for a reason. We'll be talking about that soon, but this is our 105th podcast conversation that we've done today with Al Pickett. And so, well, it's not our 105th with Al Pickett, but it's our 105th here on Abilene People. And we will see you next time. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Danny Sims. Always a pleasure. And we will see you again if we're lucky.